Charles had never imagined that a single night's misadventure at an upscale cocktail lounge would upend his world in such an unexpected manner. Working as a humble gardener at the sprawling Ashwood estate, he had long been content tending to the verdant grounds and manicured gardens of his wealthy employer. Yet that fateful evening, fate had other plans in store. On that night, an unforeseen twist of events would lead him on a remarkable journey, one that would intertwine his path with that of the elegant and enigmatic Evelyn, a woman whose life seemed woven with both glamour and heartbreak. It all began when Evelyn's fiancé, Nathan, abruptly decided not to show up for their long-awaited celebration. Caught off guard and desperate not to let the day's plans dissolve into chaos, she found herself forced into a situation that would forever change her life. As she struggled to comprehend the unfolding drama, fate introduced her to Charles, the man who, despite his lowly position as a gardener, possessed an air of mystery and an unexpectedly affluent background. Unbeknownst to everyone, Charles was not merely a gardener. He was, in fact, a billionaire who had chosen this line of work for reasons hidden behind a well-guarded secret. The contrast between his unassuming exterior and his staggering wealth was as puzzling as it was intriguing, and it ignited a spark of curiosity in Evelyn's heart. On that fateful evening, while the ambient lights of the estate's lounge flickered softly, Charles found himself at the center of an impromptu wager. Earlier that night, before fate had intertwined their destinies, Charles had been enjoying the company of two close friends, Max and Lucas. At a trendy bar downtown, their evening had been marked by laughter, the clink of whiskey glasses, and a haze of inebriation that only the best of nights could foster. As the night deepened and the third bottle of whiskey found its way into their revelry, Lucas, ever the instigator, set the stage for a challenge that would alter Charles' course forever. "Hey, do you see that captivating woman in the scarlet dress sitting at that corner table?" Lucas had slurred with a mischievous glint in his eye. Max had chuckled at the suggestion, but Charles, who prided himself on his reserved nature and gentle demeanor, had initially hesitated. Yet, spurred by the camaraderie and a taste for adventure, Charles accepted the challenge without a moment's delay. "I suppose I could give it a try," he had said with a wry smile, though his heart was secretly pounding with trepidation. Drawing a deep breath and summoning all the confidence he could muster, Charles strode gracefully toward the table where the mysterious woman sat alone. The bar, with its low lighting and warm atmosphere, only added to the enigma that surrounded her. Though her face was partially hidden by shadows, her beauty was undeniable, a blend of allure and melancholy that pulled at the heartstrings of anyone who dared to look her way. As Charles approached, his own refined yet unpretentious appearance drew fleeting glances from the other patrons. He greeted her politely, "Good evening," though his tone carried a hopeful note that belied his otherwise modest background. The woman, who would later be known as Evelyn, scarcely acknowledged his presence at first. Engrossed in her own world and nursing a glass of fine wine, she seemed lost in the depths of her thoughts. "Are you alone tonight?" Charles inquired softly, trying to break through the veil of solitude that cloaked her. With a terse yet almost wistful response, she replied, "Isn't it obvious?" Her eyes, when they finally met his, held a spark of defiance and sadness, a subtle hint of the inner turmoil that plagued her heart. Unbeknownst to Charles, Evelyn was battling more than just the immediate sting of loneliness. She was, after all, on the brink of a life-altering decision. Engaged to be married to Nathan, a man whose absence now cast a long, disconcerting shadow over her planned nuptials. She was forced to confront an unexpected betrayal. Earlier that day, when her phone had chimed with a message from Nathan, his confession had shattered the carefully constructed image of their future. "I'm sorry, but I just cannot go through with this wedding," Nathan had said in a heavy, remorseful tone, leaving Evelyn reeling from the weight of his admission. The words echoed in her mind as she tried to reconcile her shattered dreams with the reality that now lay before her. Charles, who had listened to Evelyn's terse retorts without fully comprehending the depth of her sorrow, had pressed on in his gentle manner. "Perhaps you might enjoy some company tonight?" he suggested with a warm smile, a smile that sought to bridge the gulf between their disparate worlds. But Evelyn, still reeling from the pain of betrayal, retorted with an icy precision, "I already have a fiancé." Her words, though firm, did little to hide the underlying vulnerability in her tone. In that moment, as Charles's friends Max and Lucas looked on from a nearby table, the stakes of their friendly wager became all too clear. Charles, caught in the crossfire of a bet he hadn't truly desired, felt a pang of regret. His confidence faltered for a moment, and he could not help but wonder if his charms had failed him completely. "I suppose I've lost the bet," he murmured to himself, his mind churning with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Yet even as he accepted defeat, fate had already set into motion events that would upend his quiet life forever. As the evening wore on, and the gentle hum of conversation in the lounge continued unabated, Max and Lucas reveled in the spectacle of their friend's misfortune. They joked and teased, their laughter a constant reminder of the bet's bitter consequences. Charles, meanwhile, returned to his table with a heavy heart, his thoughts lingering on the woman who had so effortlessly deflected his advances. "She is truly something else," he muttered under his breath, recalling her aloof yet striking demeanor. "I have never been turned down like that before." Several days later, while the echoes of that fateful night still reverberated in his mind, Evelyn found herself standing before a gilded mirror in her opulent dressing room. Dressed in a stunning wedding gown that accentuated her natural beauty, she could hardly believe the reflection that stared back at her. "I'm about to be married," she mused aloud, her voice a mixture of pride and irony. "Yet I seem to be dressed more like a contender for a pageant than a bride." Her musings were interrupted by the sudden appearance of Beatrice, the long-serving housekeeper who had become a trusted confidant over the years. "Oh, my dear Evelyn, you startled me," Beatrice exclaimed, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and mirth. "Why are you trying on your gown so early? They say it brings bad luck to do so before the wedding day. Who knows what might happen to the ceremony?" Evelyn, ever the independent spirit, waved off the old superstition with a confident laugh. "Nonsense, Beatrice. The wedding is set for tomorrow and nothing will deter it. I simply want to admire how splendid I look," she replied, her tone defiant yet playful. Beatrice, softening her initial admonition, admitted with a smile, "Well, you do look absolutely like a princess today." As the clock ticked closer to the hour of the wedding, Evelyn's thoughts were abruptly interrupted by the shrill ring of her telephone. A wave of relief swept over her when she saw that it was Nathan calling, a call that, for a fleeting moment, filled her with hope. "Hello, darling," she greeted him warmly, only to be met by a heavy sigh on the other end. The conversation quickly took a turn for the worse, as Nathan, his voice thick with regret and sorrow, confessed, "I'm sorry, but I can't marry you anymore. I have been unfaithful, and my heart now belongs to someone else." With that, he abruptly ended the call, leaving Evelyn's world in ruins. The pain of his betrayal was palpable, and as she dropped the phone to the floor, her heart shattered into a million irretrievable pieces. In the chaos of shattered dreams and unforeseen calamity, Evelyn resolved that she would not let despair overtake her. Determined to salvage some dignity in the face of overwhelming adversity, she stripped off her wedding gown and changed into a comfortable set of pajamas. "I will not waste a single tear for a man who has betrayed my trust," she declared to herself with quiet determination, yet a sense of urgency now gripped her. She had mere hours left to find a substitute groom before the ceremony was set in stone. That very morning, as dawn broke over the city, Evelyn set about the daunting task of securing a new partner. With her best friend Aurora's voice echoing in her mind from an earlier phone conversation, "How can you simply replace a groom as if shopping for a trinket?" She was forced to confront the harsh reality of her situation. Despite the disapproval and admonishments of her closest confidants, Evelyn was determined to forge ahead. "I will not allow this disaster to define me," she whispered, her resolve hardening with each passing minute. Stepping out of her lavish mansion with a blend of defiance and grace, Evelyn prepared to face the day head-on. As she descended the grand staircase, her eyes caught sight of a familiar figure tending to the estate's lush gardens. It was Charles, the very man whose presence had once been the subject of a drunken bet and whose quiet dignity had left a lasting impression on her. "Charles," she called out, her voice resonant with both authority and an unspoken plea for help. Charles, who had been immersed in his work of watering the exquisite rose bushes, turned slowly to face her. For a moment, the world around them seemed to pause as their eyes met. In that fleeting glance, the silent communication of shared vulnerability passed between them. "Madam, how may I be of service?" he inquired politely, unaware that his simple question would soon spiral into a series of astonishing events. Evelyn's gaze swept him from head to toe, noting the striking quality of his broad frame and the intensity in his eyes. "I need your assistance," she declared abruptly. "Marry me." The unexpected proposal sent shockwaves through both their lives. In his startled reaction, Charles accidentally redirected the stream from the garden hose straight onto Evelyn, drenching her delicate blue dress and cascading locks of hair. "Oh my goodness, turn that off immediately," she cried, half laughing in disbelief at the absurdity of the moment. Mortified, Charles quickly ceased the flow of water, his heart pounding with a mix of embarrassment and incredulity. Gathering his composure, Charles attempted to apologize. "I am terribly sorry, madam. Your sudden words took me by surprise," he explained, his voice tinged with genuine regret. Yet even as he spoke, Evelyn's eyes narrowed with a resolute determination. "I am in desperate need of a groom right now," she explained, recounting the heart-wrenching news of Nathan's betrayal and his sudden departure from her life. "My wedding is scheduled for this very afternoon, and I simply cannot allow the day to be ruined." Charles, though clearly taken aback by the rapid turn of events, could not help but feel a stirring of emotions. However, his own principles soon surfaced. "Madam, I must confess that if I ever choose to marry, it would only be for the woman I truly love," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of an unspoken truth. The air between them grew heavy with anticipation and uncertainty as Evelyn's confident facade faltered for a brief, vulnerable moment. "Then perhaps love me," she challenged, her tone softening yet filled with an earnest plea that could not be ignored. The silence that followed was charged with emotion. Charles hesitated, weighing the gravity of the proposal against the principles he held dear. Finally, with a slight tremor in his voice, he murmured, I am not sure if I can give you that promise so lightly." Evelyn, refusing to accept defeat, quickly regained her composure. "I insist. It must be done today," she said firmly, her eyes darting toward Derek, the short, stocky, and unmistakably bald driver who was standing by, a silent observer to the unfolding drama. Despite his stark contrast to everything Evelyn had ever considered ideal, she resolved that if he could agree to marry her, it might yet salvage the situation. As the morning advanced and the pressure of the impending ceremony grew, Evelyn's determination to reclaim her dignity reached new heights. With each step she took away from her former life, she seemed to shed the weight of betrayal and embrace a bold new future. In that moment, the mansion, the garden, and even the cool spray of the garden hose bore silent witness to the birth of a tale that defied convention, a story of love, honor, and the unpredictable twists of fate. In this surreal moment of both chaos and hope, Charles's internal conflict deepened. His mind raced as he tried to reconcile the undeniable physical attraction he felt with Evelyn against the resolute honesty of his heart. Could he truly set aside his own dreams for a woman he barely knew? Or was this sudden proposal simply a desperate bid by a woman scorned, a fleeting cry for rescue from the wreckage of a shattered engagement? Despite the lingering questions, one fact was clear: the events of that morning would change the course of both their lives forever. As the estate's clock continued its relentless ticking, the promise of an uncertain future hung heavy in the air. With Evelyn's declaration echoing in his ears and the resolve in her eyes leaving no room for doubt, Charles found himself standing at a crossroads, a juncture where love, fate, and the intricacies of human desire intertwined in the most unexpected of ways. And so, as the sun ascended higher in the sky and the day of reckoning approached, the seeds of a new beginning were sown in the most unlikely of gardens. After the initial shock of her unconventional proposal, Evelyn's commanding tone resonated through the cool morning air as she pressed on. "You're not going to let me marry him just because I refused, are you?" she demanded, her voice edged with both irritation and determination. Standing there with his eyes downcast, Charles felt an inexplicable conflict churn within him. He could not fathom why the mere idea of Evelyn marrying another should ignite such a deep-seated disturbance in his soul. Yet as he hesitated, a storm of emotions swirled within him, a mix of confusion, defiance, and a burgeoning recognition of the strange hold she had on him. "Come on now," Evelyn snapped, her tone brooking no delay. "What are you waiting for? Go call Derek." Her eyes, bright with urgency, scanned the manicured garden for any sign of the estate's driver. Charles's heart pounded painfully at the thought. He cursed silently, bewildered by the conflicting emotions that made him question his own desires. Was he truly unsettled by the prospect of her wedlock to someone else? Before he could answer his inner question, Evelyn's impatience spurred him into action. "Never mind, I'll do it myself," she declared, raising her voice as if to shatter the lingering doubts. Before he could protest, Charles interjected in a tone that even startled him. "All right, madam. I'll marry you." The words tumbled out with an unexpected finality, leaving him as surprised as Evelyn was by his own boldness. Evelyn tilted her head slightly, an enigmatic smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" she inquired softly, as if testing the sincerity behind his declaration. With eyes closed momentarily as if in prayer or introspection, Charles responded with a measured, "Yes, madam." In that instant, a smile blossomed on Evelyn's face, a mixture of relief and anticipation, as she beckoned him to accompany her inside the mansion to prepare for the impending ceremony. The grandeur of the estate was matched only by the tumult of events unfolding within its walls. As Evelyn strode back into the opulent foyer, she felt a surge of relief that her unforeseen predicament was being resolved by an equally unexpected savior. Her substitute groom, who, despite his modest station as a gardener, possessed a refined bearing and striking looks. The thought of disguising his true background as a billionaire behind the facade of a humble horticulturist thrilled her. In her mind, it was a simple matter of appearance. A few changes of wardrobe, a polished demeanor, and a brief reintroduction in the company of her peers would suffice. To her, the act of grooming him into a figure befitting a gentleman in her elite circles was as natural as tending the roses in her private garden. Meanwhile, as Evelyn moved ahead with her preparations, Charles's mind swirled with conflicted thoughts. He recalled his inner monologue, questioning the reason behind his discomfort at the idea of someone else claiming her hand. In a moment of introspection, he had silently scolded himself for yielding so readily to the absurdity of the situation. Instead of following Evelyn immediately, he pulled out his cell phone and reached out to his close friend, Lucas. "Lucas, what's happening?" came the familiar, teasing voice on the other end of the line. In a matter-of-fact tone, Charles explained, "I'm getting married later today." Lucas's reaction was immediate, a mixture of incredulity and amusement. "How in the world are you getting married? You don't even have a girlfriend," he exclaimed, his voice rising with disbelief. "Remember that captivating woman in the crimson gown from the bar? The one whose mere presence turned your life upside down and landed you in this role?" Charles recounted the surreal chain of events. How Evelyn, the elegant yet impulsive mistress of Ashwood Estate, had abruptly invited him to wed as a last-ditch substitute after her fiancé Nathan had deserted her mere hours before their wedding. "The ceremony is this very afternoon," he added flatly, his tone laced with a resigned irony. Lucas's words echoed over the phone, questioning the wisdom of Charles's agreement. "Why did you even agree to this? You could have just said no and walked away," he urged, warning him against entrapment. Charles glanced around, catching sight of Derek, the estate's driver, whose bald head and sturdy frame had always struck him as utterly ordinary. "I can't bear the thought of her being married off to that man," he muttered, his voice thick with frustration and an unspoken pride. Before Lucas could reply, Charles cut him off with a curt, "I'm doing this, so just leave it." The conversation ended with Lucas's laughter and teasing congratulations. "Congratulations on your wedding, my friend. Are we even invited?" he joked. Charles only managed a bitter retort before hanging up, his heart heavy, as he turned and stepped inside the mansion, leaving behind the lively banter of the outside world. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with a frenetic energy as Evelyn greeted him at the door. "You sure took your sweet time," she chided, with a playful yet impatient smile. "I've been waiting for you." Charles managed a quiet apology. "I'm sorry, madam." Evelyn, ever practical, ushered him further into the mansion. "Come here and get measured. I'll have someone fetch a suitable suit for you later," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. As they walked toward the preparation room, Evelyn glanced over curiously and asked, "And by the way, what is your name?" "Charles Parker," he replied without hesitation. Evelyn's eyes lit up, though she remained oblivious to the full depth of his hidden identity. "Parker, you say? That certainly has a refined ring to it," she remarked, completely unaware that he was, in truth, a man of far greater means than his current station suggested. That very afternoon, in a whirlwind of events that defied conventional expectations, Evelyn and Charles were wed. The news of the impromptu union rippled through the upper echelons of society. Whispers and gasps filled every room at the estate, for no one could fathom that Evelyn's substitute groom was not the charming entrepreneur she had once intended to marry. Instead, he was a modest gardener, now inexplicably transformed into the man who had captured her desperate hope. The scandal became an immediate topic of conversation in many influential circles, and the following day, Evelyn strode purposefully into her grand office, determined to set matters in order. Inside the sleek, modern office of Ashwood Enterprises, Evelyn was met with curious stares and hushed comments as she explained the unforeseen turn of events. "There was simply no reason to embark on a honeymoon with a man whom I do not truly love," she confided to a trusted colleague. "I've replaced Nathan with a man who is handsome and promising, if only on paper." Her words carried an edge of defiance, as if to preempt the inevitable gossip. Aurora, her longtime friend and confidant, couldn't resist teasing her further. "Evelyn, you're absolutely out of your mind. Where on earth did you find such a husband? And while you're at it, could you possibly find one for me too? I too am ready to settle down." Evelyn's irritation flared momentarily at Aurora's insistent queries. "Aurora, I'm in the middle of work," she snapped, though her tone was laced with the faintest hint of amusement. Aurora pressed on. "No, really? Tell me everything. I must know how you managed to pull off such a wedding so swiftly." Evelyn closed her sleek laptop and faced her friend directly. "What do you wish to know?" she asked, her voice softening slightly as she braced herself for another round of relentless questioning. "Is it truly the case that he was once merely the gardener of your mansion? He doesn't exactly look like someone who would fit that role." Aurora's disbelief was palpable. "He looks more like a man of wealth and sophistication than a common gardener," she insisted. Evelyn sighed, a rueful smile briefly crossing her lips as she recalled the events of that hectic morning. Yes, he was indeed a gardener, until circumstances compelled him to agree to this absurd arrangement. Perhaps he found it impossible to resist the monthly stipend of $10,000 I promised him. Aurora shook her head in amazement. "I never imagined you would go so far as to marry someone you don't truly love," she remarked gently. Evelyn's response was measured, almost clinical. "I wouldn't imprison myself in a loveless union, Aurora. I'm not bound by any obligation to remain with him if feelings do not grow naturally." Aurora's eyes widened, leaning in conspiratorially. "Are you saying that this isn't a final commitment?" And she whispered, her tone tinged with incredulity. Evelyn's gaze hardened for a moment, before softening once again. "I am not emotionally chained to him, that is correct," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Aurora, unable to contain her astonishment, let out a sigh. "For all this time I believed it was a genuine wedding," she confessed. Evelyn's expression shifted to one of resigned contemplation. "I know," she murmured, "but I believe the truth must come to light eventually. I am still contemplating whether to disclose everything to him." The conversation was abruptly interrupted as evening settled in, and Charles found himself in a local bar with his steadfast friends Max and Lucas. Surrounded by the dim glow of neon lights and the soft hum of conversation, he nursed one drink after another. "Is this really how you're celebrating your marriage?" Max teased, his tone light yet carrying a note of genuine concern. "You should be on a honeymoon, not drowning your sorrows in another round of drinks." Charles glared at his companions. "Stop rubbing it in," he muttered, the bitterness in his voice barely concealed. Lucas, ever the instigator, leaned forward with a smirk. "So tell us, how was your first night as a newlywed? Did your bride greet you with warmth, or was it just another peck at the altar?" Charles took a deep swig of his drink, recounting in a husky tone. "She went straight to her room and barely acknowledged me." The remark drew hearty laughter from both Max and Lucas. "It seems your supposed charm has not managed to disarm your wife at all," Lucas teased merrily. "Maybe," Max interjected thoughtfully, "she looks down on you because you remain a gardener in her eyes, a relic of her past." Lucas nodded sagely. "Perhaps you should just tell her the truth. It's obvious you don't wish to be relegated to a house husband role." Charles sighed deeply, his gaze drifting over the rim of his glass. "I know," he admitted. "I'm waiting for the right moment to confess everything, though I fear the truth might shatter what little dignity I have left." In a brief pause, he revealed with a mixture of resignation and dark humor, "After the wedding, she declared that I could no longer be a mere gardener. Now that I am her husband, I must work at her company." The group burst into raucous laughter as Charles produced the check and the supplementary credit card that Evelyn had handed him earlier, a tangible reminder of her financial support. "Look at that," Lucas joked. "She's practically paying you to be her husband." Max shook his head sympathetically. "I feel a pang of guilt for you, Charles. Your pride must be in tatters." Charles clicked his tongue in bitter amusement. "Yes, she literally paid me up front," he murmured, his tone tinged with both resentment and irony. "If you don't want to be financially dependent on her, then you'd better come clean about who you truly are." Lucas jabbed him lightly in the ribs as a reminder. "Unless you plan on living off her fortunes forever." Before Charles could muster a response, his phone buzzed abruptly. Evelyn's name flashed on the screen and he answered with a slightly slurred greeting. "Hello? Where are you?" her voice asked sharply. "It's nearly midnight and you're not home yet," she added. Max and Lucas exchanged mischievous grins, thoroughly amused by their friend's predicament. "I was out with some friends for drinks," Charles explained, his tone defensive yet weary. "I'm on my way home," he added, hoping to dispel any further teasing. "All right then," Evelyn said curtly before ending the call. As the night deepened, Lucas could not resist one final jibe. "Seems like the commander is ordering you home," he taunted. Shaking off the remark, Charles bid farewell to his companions and made his way back to the mansion. Upon his arrival, he found Evelyn waiting in the spacious living room, her expression a curious blend of concern and exasperation. "You're clearly intoxicated," she observed, her tone matter-of-fact. "Wouldn't you be if your wife didn't desire you?" Charles, his lips pursed in a pout reminiscent of a sulking child, mumbled defensively, "What did you say?" Evelyn's eyes twinkled with a hint of amusement as she suppressed a laugh at his childish demeanor. "You say you're unwanted, that I don't want you," Charles repeated in a tipsy drawl as he staggered closer, a mix of longing and defiance in his voice. Evelyn instinctively stepped back, her mind racing through the events of the previous day. "We did share a kiss at our wedding, but it was nothing more than a fleeting peck," she reminded him sharply. "And what of our honeymoon?" Charles slurred, a note of desperate longing in his tone. "Well, we're only married on paper," Evelyn interjected, her voice laced with both irony and a subtle confession. "That is, at least legally, we are not bound to each other," she clarified softly. But deep in her thoughts, a spark of possibility lingered, an unspoken acknowledgement that sometimes the heart might choose its own path, even when the law does not. "Even if it is only in my mind," Charles persisted, his tone both boastful and pitiful. "You remain my wife. You whisked me away from the throngs of women lining up for my attention." His words, laced with a mixture of pride and sorrow, hung in the air as Evelyn, her heart pounding, pulled him gently into the guest room. With her pulse racing, she wondered, "What is happening to me?" as she pressed a trembling hand against her chest. Later that night, as sleep slowly claimed her, Evelyn's mind replayed the events of the day in vivid detail. Despite her earlier denials, she found herself haunted by images of Charles's deep, dark eyes, his sculpted features, and his warm, inviting smile. In the solitude of her dreams, she imagined him kissing her with such passion that, upon waking, she could scarcely meet his gaze. The memory of that tender, almost magical moment lingered throughout the morning. At breakfast the following day, Evelyn sat at the long polished table in the sunlit dining room, her gaze averted as if avoiding the reality of their new arrangement. "Get dressed," she ordered in a brisk tone. "You're coming with me to the office for your training." Charles protested lightly. "But madam, I already have a job." Evelyn's eyes narrowed playfully. "What, are you suggesting you'd remain a mere gardener even though you're my husband now? Or are you saying you don't want to work?" she challenged. "Remember, my monthly allowance of $10,000 is more than enough for a comfortable life." Charles's pride took a subtle hit, even as his inner thoughts screamed in contradiction. He was, in fact, a man of considerable means, yet here he was forced to hide behind the identity of a humble gardener. "That's not the point," he murmured, his voice low and measured. "I simply do not wish to work for your company, if that is not permitted." For a fleeting moment he longed to reveal the truth, that he was, indeed, the owner of a thriving conglomerate, but he knew that revelation would shatter the delicate balance of their newfound union. "Fine, suit yourself," Evelyn retorted coolly, dabbing her mouth with a napkin before abruptly standing. "I'm leaving now." Charles watched her retreat, a bitter blend of frustration and resignation clouding his features. Perhaps she truly would never come to love him, he thought silently. Outside the mansion, as the day wore on, Nathan, Evelyn's former fiancé, persisted in his attempts to reach her. Despite repeated phone calls and even personal appearances at her office and the estate, she remained resolute, her dismissive words echoing in his ears whenever their paths crossed. "Go ahead and rot," she would say curtly, her voice laced with finality whenever his number flashed on her phone. In the midst of this emotional tumult, one day Evelyn recalled receiving an invitation to a homecoming event at the high school she and Nathan had once attended. A surge of anxiety gripped her at the thought of attending. The prospect of facing Nathan, coupled with the inevitable gossip about her overnight marriage to a man of questionable origins, made her stomach churn. "Are you attending?" Aurora inquired hesitantly. Evelyn, with a resigned shrug, replied, "Whether I go or not, people will still chatter. They will never cease talking about me." A pause fell between them as Evelyn contemplated her future and the way the scandal had already begun to unravel around her. "Well," she trailed off, uncertain whether to provide further explanation or let the silence speak for itself. "At least if you're there you can defend yourself," Aurora reasoned over the phone with Evelyn. "I have nothing to prove to them," Evelyn replied coolly, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. "True, but come on, do it for me," urged Aurora softly, knowing that the sting of judgment from old classmates might still linger in the halls of Rosewood Academy. Evelyn hesitated for only a moment before conceding. "I don't want to go alone," she murmured, the anxiety in her voice betraying her calm facade. Ultimately, Aurora's gentle persistence won out, and Evelyn agreed to attend the homecoming, albeit with a heavy heart. That evening, as dusk settled, and the crisp autumn air whispered secrets among the ancient oaks, Evelyn and Aurora set out separately, each swallowed by their own swirling thoughts. Before the event, Aurora had called to remind Evelyn, "You and Darian were in the same circle back at Rosewood, right?" Aurora's tone was a mix of nostalgia and playful concern. "Yes," sighed Evelyn, "but brace yourself for an awkward reunion." With that, Aurora teased lightly, "You insisted I go. Fine then. Remember, that's what friends are for," and ended the call with a cheerful farewell. Evelyn took a deep breath as she stepped through the grand entrance hall of her old alma mater, her high heels clicking confidently against the polished marble floor. Her heart pounded in tandem with the rhythm of her cautious steps as she navigated the familiar corridors. Evelyn found a tall, vacant table in a quiet corner of the decorated hall, and she paused to scan the room. An ocean of familiar faces and whispered greetings, all reminiscent of a past that was both comforting and painfully distant. Then, a sudden voice froze her in place. "Evelyn Reed, is that really you?" She turned sharply to see Bianca, one of her most cherished old classmates, her eyes alight with astonishment and joy. "It really is you! Long time no see!" Bianca exclaimed as she rushed over. "How have you been? We hardly heard from you after graduation," she continued with a playful pout, recalling how Evelyn had always been elusive, perpetually tied up in work and unapproachable due to her busy schedule. Evelyn managed a polite smile, inwardly wishing she could just slip away and hide, thinking, maybe I should have stayed home tonight. Bianca's radiant smile widened. "I'm so happy you're here tonight," she declared, and the two quickly fell into an easy conversation about old memories and new beginnings. In high school, Bianca had been known as one of the top beauties, smart, kind, and popular. Tonight, dressed in a ravishing red gown with a plunging neckline, a daring high slit, and a backless design that accentuated her graceful figure, Bianca was even more stunning than Evelyn remembered. Before long, more former classmates arrived, and one by one, familiar voices greeted Evelyn warmly. Yet, amidst the cheerful reconnections and playful teasing, Evelyn couldn't help but notice that Darian was nowhere to be seen. Whispers arose. "So, Evelyn, where's Darian? We haven't seen him in ages," someone asked in a hushed tone. Evelyn averted her gaze, her inner turmoil mounting. She longed to cry out, "We broke up," but instead she remained silent. The tension was momentarily diffused when the event's master of ceremonies called everyone's attention to the stage. "May we have Section A come up on stage?" the host announced with theatrical flair. Evelyn and her former classmates, all belonging to that section, ascended the stage and introduced themselves, sharing snippets of their lives since their days at Rosewood. Their voices mingled in a harmonious blend of nostalgia and ambition. After the introductions, they returned to their table, the chatter resuming as if nothing were amiss. Still, the absence of Darian loomed in the background, and soon, a new voice asked, "Still no sign of Darian, who's missing?" The room fell silent for a moment before a deep, unmistakable baritone echoed from the far end. Evelyn's stomach clenched as she recognized the voice immediately. "Hey, can we talk?" Darian's tone was laden with urgency as he approached her directly. Evelyn's response was cold and measured. "There's nothing left to say between us. We're done. I'm married now." The declaration sent ripples through the room, and gasps erupted from those nearby. "You're married? To whom?" Bianca blurted out in stunned disbelief. Evelyn forced a smile, a mask to hide the complexity of her feelings, as she internally cursed the irony that the man she'd married was, in truth, her humble gardener. Before she could offer any further explanation, a commotion burst forth near the entrance. People began squealing in excitement, their whispers growing louder with each passing moment. Evelyn furrowed her brow, trying to decipher the sudden uproar. "What's going on?" a nearby guest asked, and another chimed in. "That's Charles Parker!" A murmur of recognition swept through the crowd. "My gosh, he's here! And did you know? He's the son of the Academy's benefactor!" Evelyn was taken aback. She had never suspected that Charles, whose unassuming presence at the estate had once seemed so inconspicuous, was also an alumnus of Rosewood Academy. In disbelief, she watched as he strode confidently toward her group, his presence commanding attention. She recalled the brief introduction they'd shared back at the bar where fate had entwined their lives, where he had merely identified himself as Charles the gardener. Now, as he neared, Evelyn's heart pounded faster, torn between shock and a vague hope that perhaps the past could be rewritten. "Why are you here?" she hissed softly, more to herself than to him. With a confident smile that belied the subtle tension between them, Charles replied, "I found out that we both attended Rosewood Academy, so I thought I'd come to the homecoming for the first time." Before she could gather her thoughts, he slipped an arm around her waist, in a gesture that was both protective and familiar, as if to silently declare that fate had conspired once more to bring them together. Caught off guard, Evelyn could only stutter, "I guess we should have come here together." Her words trailed off as her classmates gawked and murmured in excitement. Darian's face, however, darkened into a scowl, a storm of anger and disbelief painted across his features. "So this is your husband?" Bianca shrieked with an excited mix of shock and amusement. Charles, ever affable, turned to the group and announced with a warm, confident smile, "I'm Charles Parker, and yes, I'm Evelyn's husband." The revelation ignited a frenzy among the onlookers. Laughter, teasing remarks, and jubilant cheers filled the hall. Evelyn herself stood in stunned silence, her mind reeling. She never expected that the quiet, unpretentious man who had once mended the gardens of her mansion would turn out to be someone so significant, someone who could challenge the very assumptions of her past relationships. "No wonder Darian and I didn't end up together," someone murmured sympathetically, the tone hinting at both pity and understanding. Ariane's anger was palpable as he glared at Charles, his voice laced with bitterness. "Well, you must be nothing more than a stand-in husband then." Charles's expression darkened briefly, his eyes flashing with a mix of hurt and defiance as he retorted, "I'm not like some people who throw away the one they should cherish." His words, sincere and resolute, drew further teasing from the assembled crowd. Teasing that was affectionate in nature, for they recognized the sweetness with which he spoke to Evelyn. Feeling overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment, Evelyn excused herself from the commotion. Grasping Charles's hand firmly, she tried to pull him away from the throng, but Darian's voice rang out in protest. "Wait, Evelyn!" Darian pleaded, his tone desperate and regretful. Evelyn turned slowly, her face a study in cold determination. "You have no right to call me that anymore," she said sharply, her voice trembling with finality. "I'm someone's wife now, Darian." His eyes pleaded silently as he struggled to regain some semblance of control. "I'm sorry. I really did mess up." Evelyn's response was firm. "You did, and you did nothing to fix it. I know you well enough to understand that if you truly cared, you'd never let something so dear slip away. But you let me go, and now you're gone." As she turned on her heel to leave, she couldn't resist one final barb. "Oh, and do yourself a favor. Start using mouthwash." With that, Evelyn and Charles departed the event together, leaving behind a trail of astonished whispers and shattered expectation. Later, back at the sprawling mansion, Evelyn pounced on Charles with a mixture of exasperation and curiosity. "What was that all about?" she demanded as soon as the door closed behind them. "You introduced yourself as Charles Parker, yet now I hear you're the son of the Academy's benefactor. Explain yourself." Charles, meeting her intense gaze, said gently, "Let me talk, Evelyn. Please, just hear me out." Tapping her foot impatiently, she allowed him a moment of reprieve. Taking a deep breath, Charles began, "My real name is Charles Parker, and I'm actually a billionaire, the owner of several expansive shopping centers across the country. I only ended up working as your gardener because I lost a bet with my friends at that very bar where we first met." Evelyn's brow furrowed as she pressed, "Wait, that's not all, is it?" Charles nodded slowly, continuing, "Originally I was supposed to work here for just a month, but then in a twist of fate you asked me to marry you after telling me that your ex, Darian, had bailed on you. And when you threatened to marry Derek, the driver, if I refused, I don't know, I felt a surge of anger and something more. In that moment, I agreed." Evelyn's eyes widened in disbelief as she teased lightly, "Why would you be upset if you married Derek? Don't tell me you actually like me? Love at first sight?" Though her tone was teasing, her jaw dropped when Charles nodded in response, his expression solemn. "Perhaps I didn't realize it immediately, but I have been falling for you more each day," he confessed softly. For a moment, Evelyn tried to laugh it off. "I was only joking," she offered with a weak chuckle. But Charles remained silent, his sincerity impossible to ignore. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out the check and the supplementary credit card she had given him earlier and returned them gently to her. "What's this?" Evelyn asked, perplexed. With quiet conviction, Charles replied, "I'm a billionaire, Evelyn. I don't need a penny from you. Now that you're my wife, it's my responsibility to provide for you." He then produced his own sleek black credit card, the kind with no spending limit, and handed it to her. "Travel anywhere you desire, buy whatever your heart longs for. There is no limit, just like the limitless love I feel for you." Evelyn's heart raced as she absorbed his words, flushing with a mixture of astonishment and embarrassment. She stuttered, I'm going to take a shower then. Good night," and bolted upstairs before she could say more. Collapsing onto her bed later that night, her mind whirled with conflicting emotions. It had only been a little over a month since they met, and yet Charles's declarations were leaving her reeling. Was it truly possible for feelings to blossom so rapidly? And what would become of their fragile marriage if his belief in their union was genuine? As the night waned, Evelyn found herself wrestling with doubts. What if Charles discovered that this marriage was nothing more than a desperate ploy, a hastily arranged arrangement born from a lost bet? The memory of his confession about the bet echoed in her thoughts, and she couldn't help but wonder if trust could ever fully be restored. Yet, as she recalled Darian's long-standing betrayal after a decade together, she reasoned that perhaps Charles's earnestness was genuine, and that his vulnerabilities were not a reflection of deception. Still, uncertainty gnawed at her. Over the following days, Evelyn began to alter her routine, returning home late at night, sometimes close to dawn, to avoid confronting the newly complicated feelings Charles evoked. That same evening, she met Aurora at a chic local bar to unwind, and in a quiet corner, Evelyn recounted the tumultuous events of the reunion. "It was wild," she said, shaking her head in disbelief. "My ex Darian made a scene, and that's how I found out that my so-called gardener is actually a billionaire." Aurora's eyes widened in playful envy. "You basically hit the jackpot," she teased. Evelyn quickly interjected, "Remember, we're not actually married, not in the legal sense at least." Aurora's tone shifted to genuine concern as she pressed, "But what happens if he finds out the truth? Aren't you worried?" Evelyn, trying to mask her inner turmoil, responded sharply, "I don't care if he gets angry, let him." But Aurora wasn't convinced. Studying Evelyn's face, she gently prodded, "Really? You're coming home late, drinking more often. It's as if you're avoiding something deeper. You don't really want him to leave, do you?" Evelyn scoffed, though her eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Don't be absurd," she said dismissively, yet Aurora squeezed her hand and whispered, "Don't deprive yourself of a chance to be truly happy, Evelyn. Don't let one man's past mistakes dictate your future. Charles may be different, and if he isn't, you'll never know until you give it a real chance." Aurora's heartfelt advice lingered with Evelyn, even after she returned home that night. When she walked through the mansion's grand foyer, she found Charles waiting in the living room, his expression tender yet marked by concern. "Why are you still up? he asked softly, noticing the dark circles under her eyes and the wistful look that betrayed sleepless nights. "You've been coming home so late lately, and you've been drinking too. Are you avoiding me?" Evelyn hesitated, unable to meet his gaze. The silence that stretched between them was heavy with unspoken questions and lingering doubts. Finally, as the clock ticked past midnight, she mustered a quiet reply, unsure if she could face the truth of what they both felt. For several long minutes, Evelyn's mind churned as she absorbed the complexity of the situation. Charles, whose unwavering determination had always been a mystery to her, stood before her with a distant look in his eyes. It was as though his gaze, filled with a subtle mixture of sorrow and resolve, was silently questioning everything. The memory of Aurora's earlier admonitions echoed faintly in her mind. Perhaps Aurora had been right all along. Could it be that she was punishing Charles for the betrayals of her past, specifically for what Darian had done, and, in a twisted form of self-flagellation, denying herself a second chance at true love? Even as these thoughts swirled, Charles's persistence cut through her hesitation. Approaching her with gentle firmness, he said, "If you feel awkward with me here, I can simply leave now and return to my own place." His tone was soft but laced with an undercurrent of desperation. For an instant, Evelyn's heart clenched. She wanted to object, to tell him that his presence was not the source of her inner turmoil, but before she could muster a single word, Charles had already turned and walked away. Just as she'd gathered the courage to call after him and open her heart, a bombshell of news exploded into the silence that followed. A sudden revelation rattled the fragile calm of the moment. The whispers, the rumors, the venomous accusations that their marriage was nothing more than a sham, a desperate retaliatory act by Evelyn to get back at Darian for his infidelity. In that instant, as if summoned by fate, her phone rang, and it was Aurora on the line, her voice thick with tears and anguish. "Evelyn!" Aurora sobbed, her words trembling. "What happened? Why are you crying?" Evelyn's heart pounded as she tried to steady her voice. "I'm sorry, Aurora. I didn't mean for this to happen. I was so drunk when Darian asked about you." Aurora's words faltered as she continued. "I slipped up and ended up telling him that our marriage isn't real, that you only married Charles as a substitute because Darian bailed on you. I'm so sorry." Closing her eyes tightly, Evelyn felt a surge of annoyance mixed with sorrow at her dear friend's inadvertent betrayal. "This is such a mess, Aurora," she said softly, fighting back the sting of hurt before she could let it spill over. "I know, I'm so sorry, friend." Aurora continued to cry on the other end, and all Evelyn could do was try to soothe her. "It's all right, stop crying. What's done is done. Let's just try to move past this, okay?" After a few more tearful apologies, the call ended, leaving Evelyn to face the fallout of rumors and revelations that were already rippling through her office and the corridors of her sprawling estate. Earlier that day, Charles had called her with a tone so cold and clipped that the hairs on her arms had stood on end. His voice, tinged with anger and a hint of betrayal, had filled her with a disquiet she could not shake off. After about half an hour of agonizing silence, Charles finally arrived in person. His eyes, usually so gentle, now shone with a burning intensity as he demanded, "Is it true? Is it true?" "Is what true?" Evelyn replied, her voice, even though her heart fluttered uncertainly. "Is it true that you never filed our marriage contract?" Charles pressed, his gaze piercing as though searching for answers in the depths of her soul. Evelyn fell silent for a moment before slowly nodding. "Yes," she confessed softly, "I never filed it. I didn't want us to be bound to each other so hastily. I assumed that, given how suddenly we got married, you'd want the freedom to decide as things progressed." A pained look crossed Charles's face, and his eyes flashed with hurt as he uttered, "You tricked me." The single word cut deep, resonating with all the unspoken accusations and sorrow that had been building up over the past weeks. "I'm sorry, Charles," Evelyn pleaded, her voice trembling with regret. "I only did it for us, so that if in time we found people we truly loved, we wouldn't have to lose what we shared. But if that's the way you see it, then marry me properly this time." Before she could react further, Charles interjected with a sudden determination. "Marry me for real this time, and I'll handle all the paperwork, so that there's no escaping what is rightfully ours." Stunned, Evelyn could only manage a weak, "Ha," Her mind reeled at this unexpected declaration. It was not the reaction she had anticipated, yet it stirred something deep within her. "I won't settle for anything less," Charles continued, stepping closer so that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "We're already married in the eyes of God, Evelyn. The only thing missing is the legal stamp that says you're mine. Let me show you how serious I am." He placed his hands firmly on the desk, leaning in as if to seal his vow with a kiss. Evelyn's face flushed hotly as his nearness overwhelmed her. I don't know what to say, Charles," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Just wait for the schedule of our wedding," he replied, his tone resolute. "I promise, I will make it official, and you won't be able to run away from what we have." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Evelyn standing alone with a pounding heart and a mind swirling with emotions. After he left, Evelyn exhaled a shaky breath. His effect on her was undeniable. When he was near, she felt as if her heart might burst with passion. "We're going to have a heart attack because of that man," she murmured under her breath. She recalled the long, comfortable years with Darian, when their relationship had been more like an easy friendship slowly evolving into romance. But with Charles, every moment was electric, a chaotic mix of excitement and uncertainty. It wasn't merely a case of butterflies in her stomach. It was as if an entire zoo of wild emotions had taken residence there, and she was both terrified and exhilarated by the chaos. Deep down, Evelyn couldn't ignore the fact that she was relieved Charles wanted to make their union real, rather than treat their wedding as nothing more than a symbolic stunt. And she couldn't deny that she had fallen for him, though not without reservations. Memories of the reckless bet he'd once made with his friends when he first agreed to be her stand-in flashed in her mind. "I have to be careful," she told herself. "Who knows if he's just playing with me?" The thought nearly made her curse out loud as she stepped outside her mansion, only to find two familiar figures waiting by the driveway. There, almost every day lately, Darian and Charles appeared side by side. Darian, ever the smug reminder of what had been lost, casually stood with his hands stuffed in his pockets, while Charles leaned impatiently against his sleek sports car. "What are you two doing here again?" she snapped, slamming the front door behind her as if to shut out the intrusion. "Evelyn, we're here to pick you up," Darian drawled, a note of condescension underlying his words. "And I'm here to give you a ride too," Charles added with a wry smile. Evelyn rolled her eyes. "And I'm supposed to choose which one of you gets the honor? For your information, I have my own driver, and a fleet of cars, mind you." She snapped, "It's way too early for your nonsense." Both men looked contrite for a moment before Darian's tone darkened. "Who dares call you those terrible names I've been hearing about?" he demanded, clearly incensed. "Exactly," Charles growled in response. "I'll make those fools pay for speaking ill of my wife." Darian's face contorted in anger. "Your wife?" he retorted bitterly, reminding him that their marriage wasn't even legally registered. In that charged moment, the two men glared at each other, as if prepared to trade blows. Evelyn rolled her eyes once again, exasperated by their puerile antics. "You both act like children," she scolded. "At least we took our vows in a church. Charles, you know what you are. Darian, you're just an ex. Know your place." "Know your place?" Darian spat, lunging forward as if to strike. Without thinking, Evelyn sprinted between them, pushing Darian back before his hand could even come close to Charles. "Will you both cut it out?" she shouted. "If you're here to bicker and fight, then get lost. I'm not riding with either of you. I'd rather take the bus." "Evelyn, please," Darian pleaded, grabbing her arm in a desperate attempt to keep her near. "Give me another chance. I'm sorry, I truly regret everything." Evelyn's eyes hardened as she pulled him roughly toward his car. "I don't regret that we broke up," she said coldly. "You hurt me, and you forgot all about our plans. Now just deal with it." With a final, forceful shove, she dragged Darian into the driver's seat of his car, yanked the door open, thankfully unlocked, and slammed it shut. "We're over," she declared. "Just leave me alone." Turning abruptly, she faced Charles. "And as for you," she snapped, "you know our marriage isn't real, yet you continue to pester me about it." Without waiting for a response, she stormed toward her own car, ordering her driver to take off immediately. Later that evening, after the tumult of confrontations and painful admissions, Evelyn arrived at her office, a sleek, modern space that was her sanctuary from the chaos of her personal life. Not long after, Charles appeared, his presence almost magnetic despite the tension between them. "What now?" Evelyn asked, covering her face with one hand as if to hide her vulnerability. "We haven't really talked yet," Charles said softly, his tone gentle but determined. "I'm here to remind you that I love you, and to tell you that later today our wedding planner will come by the mansion to talk to you about making our union official." Evelyn looked up in startled disbelief. "I didn't even agree to marry you," she protested. "Evelyn," Charles insisted firmly, stepping closer so that his arm could wrap around her waist, "we're already married in spirit. This is just to make it legal." Her eyes narrowed, and she forced herself not to show even a glimmer of excitement. "I said I'm not agreeing," she replied, her voice trembling between defiance and uncertainty. Undeterred, Charles moved closer, his gaze locked on hers, until his focus dropped to the curve of her lips. "I can't wait to marry you again, for real, so I can finally kiss you properly and have you all to myself," he whispered, his words laden with promises that made her cheeks flame. "Don't talk like that," she snapped, swatting his arm away as her heart fluttered. "Let go of me." "Only if you promise you won't run away," he teased softly, his tone both playful and earnest. "If I have to, I'll court you every single day. After all, you dragged me to that altar once. I can't let you run off now." "Do you think this is just one of your silly bets with your buddies?" Evelyn challenged, her tone a mixture of exasperation and hurt. "Because if it is, and if once I finally agree to marry you, you disappear the very next day, telling me it was all just a game, then I want answers." Quickly, Charles grabbed her hand and started walking. "Hey, where are you taking me?" she asked, half confused, half anxious. "We're getting married right now," he declared, his voice imbued with a passion that left no room for doubt. "Pick any church you want and I'll drive you there immediately. Then, this endless nonsense in your head will finally stop." Unable to hold back a laugh, Evelyn retorted, "You're ridiculous, now go home, I have work to do," as she pushed him toward the door. Charles left with a wink, and as soon as the door closed behind him, Evelyn allowed herself a small, secret smile. "He wants to marry me, right this moment," she murmured, almost to herself. Later, alone in her room, she caught herself browsing wedding dresses online, a harmless indulgence that in a moment of self-awareness nearly made her drop her phone in disbelief. "What am I doing?" she thought. "I'm far too carried away by his sweet talk." Over the following months, Charles courted Evelyn with a persistence that was almost overwhelming. He sent her elaborate bouquets of flowers, delivered decadent boxes of chocolates, and arranged for candlelit dinners at her favorite upscale restaurants. Often he would appear unannounced at her office or mansion, each time bringing a new layer of tenderness to their fragile bond. And then, on one particularly memorable night, he planned something truly extravagant, a serenade beneath the moonlit sky. "Dude, are you sure about this?" Peter, one of his close friends, asked with a frown as they prepared backstage. "Come on, Peter," Josh interjected. "Let's just support Charles. It's only for tonight." Relenting with a laugh, Peter finally said, "All right, but do it well, or I'm not making you godfather to my future kids if Evelyn doesn't like it." "Wow, you're already thinking about kids," Josh teased further. "We're not even sure she'll say yes to your proposal." Charles grinned widely. "That's the whole point of this, isn't it?" he said, his eyes shining with mischief and hope. "Now enough talk. Let's get on with it." Their voices and laughter mingled with the soft strains of music as Charles took center stage, ready to serenade Evelyn with all the passion of his heart. Every note he sang seemed to carry the weight of their shared history, the bitter regrets, the hopeful promises, and the undeniable truth that something real was blossoming between them. As Evelyn listened, her heart swelled with conflicting emotions, torn between the past and the possibility of a future filled with genuine love. After a long, emotionally charged day filled with revelations and confrontations, Evelyn Reed had finally found a moment of quiet in her private sanctuary. Having just finished a warm, soothing shower, she wrapped herself in a soft robe and listened intently as the faint strumming of a guitar drifted through the open balcony door. Curious, she stepped out onto the balcony and was immediately surprised to see Charles Parker down below. There he was, seated on the steps beside two of his close friends, serenading the twilight with his guitar, while his companions provided harmonies on their instruments. Evelyn's eyes twinkled with amusement as she murmured to herself, "Do people still do serenades?" The unexpected performance stirred something deep inside her, a tingle of excitement that reminded her of youthful courtship and the magic of spontaneous love. She had never imagined that Charles, the man she had once thought merely a humble gardener, could sing with such soulful passion. When the song drew to a close, Charles looked up, his warm smile reaching his eyes, and he playfully blew her a kiss. Though Evelyn rolled her eyes in mock exasperation, she could not entirely hide the small, genuine grin that tugged at her lips. After a moment's pause, she went back inside to change into something more suitable for the evening. Soon she made her way downstairs, greeting her unexpected visitors with a mix of curiosity and cheer. As they gathered in the living room, Charles wasted no time introducing her to his friends. "So, how much did Charles pay you guys to be his backup band tonight?" Evelyn asked with a teasing laugh. One of the friends shot back with a grin. "He said he'd make us godfathers of his future kids," Charles interjected with a playful smirk. "Well, if that happens, I promise they'll be as handsome and smart as their dear old dad." Evelyn arched an eyebrow and teased, "Wow, you're awfully confident we'll ever get that far." Charles responded with a gleam in his eye. "Why shouldn't I be? Even if it takes years. When I'm old and gray, I'll keep courting you every single day." The atmosphere lightened further as Josh, one of his friends, chimed in. "You know, Evelyn, we've known Charles our whole lives. This is the first time we've seen him so serious about a woman." Peter agreed, adding, "True. We never imagined he'd ever settle down like this." Charles, sitting tall and proud as he basked in the friendly banter, clearly appreciated the support of his lifelong friends. Evelyn teased him once more. "Oh sure, your best friends are going to sing your praises all day, aren't they?" At that, the three men cleared their throats in unison, and Evelyn couldn't help but burst into genuine laughter. After a while, Peter and Josh excused themselves with warm farewells, leaving Evelyn and Charles in a quieter, more intimate space. Charles suddenly asked, "So, what about me? Am I allowed to stay?" His tone carried a playful vulnerability as he reminded her, "After all, you did let me live here before. That was in another time." Evelyn rolled her eyes affectionately and retorted, "That was before, Charles. We're not even dating properly yet, and you're already trying to move in." Charles scratched his head with an innocent smile. "Not really, just checking my luck." Evelyn shook her head and laughed. "Oh, get going, it's late and I'm tired," she said, sending him off with a teasing admonition. "Okay, have a good night." "Maybe you'll dream about me," Charles replied with a soft chuckle. Then, in a moment of playful boldness, he joked, "Any chance I could get a goodnight kiss?" Before he could finish his playful plea, Evelyn leaned in and pressed a sweet kiss onto his cheek. "I was aiming for your lips," Charles teased with a wide, delighted smile, "but that'll do just fine." With that, Evelyn whispered a gentle "good night" before returning to her private world. Yet, just as Charles was about to climb into his car and head home, Evelyn called out softly, "Charles?" He paused and turned back, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "Yes?" he replied. Evelyn's tone, though calm, carried a note of finality as she spoke. "About your courting of me. I've made a decision." Charles's heart skipped a beat. His stomach did a little flip as he stuttered, "What decision, please?" "Stop courting me?" His voice trailed off, and it felt as if the weight of his world had momentarily dropped onto the pavement. "Stop courting me," Evelyn repeated, but then with a playful smile brightening her face, she added, "Because I'm saying yes." In that instant, Charles's eyes widened in surprise. You're saying yes?" he asked in a hushed tone. With newfound clarity and joy dancing in her eyes, Evelyn declared, "Yes, Charles, I'm saying yes." Unable to contain his elation, Charles rushed back over, scooped her up in his arms, and spun her around in a loving embrace. Evelyn laughed with pure delight as he declared, "No take-backs now, we're getting married." Still catching her breath, she protested, "Are you really serious about that? Perhaps we could just take it slow?" But Charles was insistent. "No way," he insisted, his voice filled with conviction. "I want to marry you right away because I'm sure beyond a shadow of a doubt that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He paused, searching her eyes. "Unless, do you not want to marry me?" Evelyn's heart swelled as she grinned, looking deep into his eyes. Then why did you finally say yes to me? Does that mean you love me too? She teased, though her tone was layered with earnest vulnerability. The joy in their exchange was palpable, and it felt as though nothing else existed in that moment but the two of them. Say it, Charles, he coaxed gently. I want to hear it. Say what? She replied with a teasing lilt, though she knew full well what he meant. I haven't heard you say, I love you yet, he pressed softly. Evelyn's cheeks warmed as she protested. Do I really have to? It's embarrassing. Embarrassing? You're embarrassed about loving me? Charles joked, his voice lightening the tension. I'm supposed to be an Amazon warrior, remember? He added with a laugh, evoking images of legendary heroes. Evelyn couldn't help but join in the laughter. Fine, she said dramatically, then sighed as if making a heartfelt confession. I love you, Charles. Charles's eyes sparkled as he murmured back, I love you too, Evelyn. I promise to be a good husband. I'll never hurt you the way your ex did. I won't replace you, and may lightning strike me if I ever even glance at another woman. Evelyn playfully shot back, You'd better not, because no one can match my beauty, my wealth, or my attitude. Charles laughed and teased, Oh, you've got the sass for sure. With a light smacking of her arm, she smiled and said, I'm only kidding, of course I'm never letting you go. Now, off you go, get out of here. All right, I'm going to bed. Don't try crawling in again, Charles replied with a mock salute. Prepare yourself, our wedding is happening soon, he added as he waved goodbye and climbed into his car. Evelyn watched it drive away, a smile lingering on her face as she whispered softly to herself, I'm ready to marry you, Charles. A few weeks later, the long-awaited day arrived. Charles and Evelyn were wed in a breathtaking ceremony at St. Augustine Church, a stunning historic building that had become the talk of the town. Friends and family from both sides gathered to celebrate their union. Even Darian, Evelyn's former fiancé, made an appearance among the guests, his presence a bittersweet reminder of past mistakes. At the reception, as soft music played and the dance floor filled with joyous movement, Darian approached Evelyn. Thank you for letting me come, he said humbly as they shared a slow dance. Across the room, Charles watched quietly, his gaze filled with a mix of satisfaction and lingering sorrow for what had been lost. Evelyn, noticing the exchange, said to Darian, You should thank Charles. He's the one who wanted you to come, for your own closure so you could see how truly happy I am now that we're together. Darian nodded slowly, a resigned smile on his face. I'm glad you ended up with someone like him, he admitted softly. I now understand that love isn't measured by the number of years spent together or how well you think you know someone. Sometimes, the feeling someone gives you in a single day can outshine a decade of shared history. Evelyn smiled kindly. I did love you, Darian, she said with warmth and regret, but what I feel for Charles is entirely different. Darian looked at her, then turned his eyes toward Charles, who was approaching with a calm, content smile. My time's up, Darian murmured, stepping back and offering a parting handshake to Charles. All yours, brother. With a final soft smile, Darian departed, leaving Evelyn and Charles to share a tender dance under the soft glow of chandeliers. Later, as they twirled on the dance floor, Charles teased, Aren't you jealous? Evelyn laughed and replied, Why would I be? I know you could always beat anyone who dares pull a stunt. Their playful banter continued, punctuated by affectionate glances and shared laughter. By the way, Charles added with a wink, I already sent in the paperwork to register our marriage. You can't back out now. You're such a worrywart, Evelyn teased back. But don't worry, I'm not planning on leaving you ever again. Charles leaned in to kiss his bride, tenderly, murmuring, You can't escape me now. Their closeness, so natural and filled with unspoken promises, was a testament to the strength of their newfound bond. A year later, Charles paced nervously outside the delivery room at the hospital, his heart heavy with both excitement and worry. Evelyn was about to give birth. He had longed to be by her side, but strict hospital rules would not allow him to enter the delivery room. Instead, Aurora had come to support Evelyn, as her own parents were unavailable at that late hour. Sit down, Charles, Aurora gently chided him, noticing his jittery state. You make me dizzy with all this pacing. Sorry, Charles admitted, his voice shaking with nerves. I'm just so anxious. I hope everything goes well with the baby. After what felt like an eternity, the door to the delivery room finally swung open. Charles rushed over to the nearest doctor. "Doctor, what happened? Why did it take so long? Is my wife okay?" he demanded, his voice edged with panic. "Please, calm down, sir," the doctor replied reassuringly. "There's no cause for alarm. We just didn't realize that Ms. Reed was having triplets." Charles's heart nearly stopped at the word triplets. "Triplets?" he gasped, the shock evident in his voice. "Yes, sir, that's why the delivery took longer than expected." The doctor smiled kindly. "Congratulations, Mr. Parker, your wife is recovering well." Charles sank into a nearby chair, relief mingled with disbelief. "Thank you, doctor," he murmured, feeling as if he were floating on air. Moments later, Aurora entered with a joyful exclamation. "Oh my gosh, 3 babies right away!" Evelyn, who had been moved to a private room, slowly awoke. The very first thing she asked with a tender smile was, "Charles, where are the babies?" "They're in the nursery," Charles explained softly, taking her hand in his. "They'll bring them in when it's time to feed. I'm so proud of you, Evelyn." Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "Thank you, my love. I know it was incredibly hard for you to go through this, especially having triplets." Evelyn groaned softly, half in pain yet smiling through the exhaustion. "I guess 3 is enough, right? No more next time," she joked, though her tone hinted at the agony of the labor. Charles nodded understandingly. "It's your body, you decide. I'll always respect your choices." Just then, a nurse appeared with 3 tiny infants wrapped in soft blankets. Charles and Evelyn both stared in awe as they beheld their children, 2 boys and 1 sweet little girl. "Have you thought of names yet?" Evelyn asked tenderly. Charles smiled, cradling their baby girl gently. "Not just yet, my dear. I wanted to wait until you woke up fully, but I already know our little princess will be cherished always." Evelyn's eyes shone with maternal pride as she whispered, "She's lucky. She has 2 big brothers to protect her, and you're here too, to show her what it means to be truly loved. That way, she'll have the highest standards when she starts dating someday." Evelyn teased softly, eliciting a laugh from Charles. "You're talking about boyfriends when she's just been born," she giggled. "We'll see if any boy ever comes close to her," Charles joked in return, his tone light and playful. After a few moments of joyful laughter and tender embraces, Charles leaned forward and kissed Evelyn's forehead, gently. "You have completed my life, Evelyn," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You and our children are my world." And so, against all odds and through all the twists of fate, they began a new chapter of their lives together, raising their triplets with unwavering love, resilience, and the promise of happiness that would guide them through every storm. In the years that followed, their story became a legend in their town. Who would have imagined that the man everyone assumed to be a mere gardener was actually a billionaire? Who could have foreseen that a hastily arranged, fake proposal would evolve into a lifelong commitment? Their journey, filled with passion, hardships, laughter, and tears, was a testament to the transformative power of love. It was a story that resonated with anyone who believed in second chances and the magic of destiny. A reminder that sometimes life's most unexpected turns lead to the most beautiful endings. As the celebration continued and the soft strains of music floated through the air, Charles and Evelyn danced beneath the stars. Their hearts were light, their souls entwined in a bond that defied all expectations. In that radiant moment, with the glow of their children nearby and the love of family and friends surrounding them, they knew that every challenge, every risk, and every moment of uncertainty had been worth it. Thank you so much for watching this incredible journey of unexpected love, resilience, and second chances. In this story, we witnessed how fate can turn the most unlikely circumstances into a beautiful beginning, reminding us that true love often comes when we least expect it, and that sometimes our past heartaches lead us to the happiness we deserve. Whether it's about embracing a bold new start or learning to forgive and grow, this tale shows that love has the power to transform every twist of life. What do you think about taking risks in love? Have you ever experienced a surprising turn in your own relationships? Drop your thoughts and stories in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. And if you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories. Remember, every comment makes our community stronger. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.